Welcome to The Week Ahead, a podcast by SBM Intelligence. I'm your host, Veronica Pana Igube. Every Friday, we explore stories that are shaping our continent. Benin's new president, Romuald Wadagni, has commenced a subregional tour across several West African countries to strengthen diplomatic relations, promote economic cooperation, and address regional security challenges. What should his top priority during this tour be? Nigeria has intensified its fight against terrorism, securing 150 terrorism-related convictions and sentencing four individuals to death for their role in the 2022 Oyo church attack. What additional measures should Nigeria adopt to prevent terrorism and strengthen national security? Meanwhile, an army officer was killed during a rescue mission involving students in Oyo State, underscoring the risks security personnel face while safeguarding civilians. What more can be done to ensure and enhance the safety of security personnel during rescue operations? Joining us today for further insights is Confidence Mark Harry, security analyst at SBM Intelligence. Welcome, Confidence, to the podcast.
Hello, Veronica. Good afternoon. It's great to be back here.
It's always great to have you. Let's begin with our first story where we're seeing the new president of Benin start his sub-regional tour to several West African countries. What are your thoughts about what his priorities should be during this tour? Is this a new development where we're seeing the president of a new country, we're referring to Benin, go round neighboring countries to kind of like build a relationship and kind of drive economic cooperation as well? What do you think this also signals to not only the people of the country, but also to the neighbors who is going to visit?
All right. So I think that as a bit of background, we need to, I think there's a need to rehash the timelines of what he has been up to in the few days that he has been in office. Got into office following an election that happened a few months ago. So he's first on the job. And on the 1st of June this month, he came to Abuja. He met President Tinubu to discuss bilateral relations, economic cooperation, regional security, and developments within ECOWAS. That's the Economic Community of West African States. So one thing we should note from this is that Nigeria is Benin's largest neighbor and one of its most important economic partners, having extensive links in trade, transport, energy, and cross-border commerce. So the next day, he left Nigeria and then he went to Burkina Faso, and then he had talks subsequently in Niger, with the Niger interim president Abdurrahman Chiani. And the two leaders agreed to revitalize bilateral relations and begin the process of reopening the Benin-Niger border, which has remained closed since 2023. So both the committee of experts to identify the obstacles to cooperation and propose measures to facilitate the reopening of the border within 15 days. So they also discussed the terrorist threat in affecting both of their countries and the wider region, and they reaffirmed their commitments to cooperate against terrorism. Then on the same day, he traveled to Burkina Faso where he met President Ibrahim Traore, and then they focused on strengthening political dialogue and expanding cooperation in national security, counterterrorism, trade, infrastructure, logistics, and vocational training. So I think on the third day, he also went to Togo to visit foreign ambassador. He also spoke largely about the same issues on security. All of this seems to point to the fact that there seems to be a renewed interest. Maybe you could call it an issue gradual, like we call it here in Nigeria, for the president to punch above it and economic matters. And Benin, as we know, is a very small country, sandwiched between Togo and Nigeria. Nigeria being the biggest in the region, and a lot of its economy, which is productively in the central and southern parts of the country, is tied towards trade with Togo and Nigeria. And then in the north, in terms of frontier commerce or cross-border goods when it comes to low-level agricultural trade and commerce taking place in the north of Niger. And so it's important. And one of the key drivers for the outreach to Niger is the fact that in 2023, when the Niger coup happened, the coup that ousted Mohamed Bazoum in July, ECOWAS rallied together and decided to place sanctions on Niger for what they considered as an anti-democratic behavior or illegal change of government. The plan was to invade Niger, and ECOWAS members resolved to close their land borders against Niger. The plan failed to materialize, but didn't take it lightly, and it decided to exert some sanctions on Benin, given the fact that some of it was using the port in Cotonou as it's very vital, one of the key international trade hubs. Benin has some ports there, and Niger is landlocked, so they're using it as an important shipping route. So it affected Benin's economy so much so that when the AES eventually pulled away from ECOWAS, about a year or two later, they went up north to Morocco as a source for international trade because Algeria would have been a great option, but there was an incident in when the Malian drone the border so the AES, that's the Alliance of Sahelian States, which comprised of the military juntas in Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso came together and then they started beefing Algeria. So Morocco was the next logical point because Morocco is a rival of Algeria. And so all of the geopolitics in the region made it quite interesting. It is also important to add as I wrap up this segment that before the coup in Niger happened in 2023, there was a $400 million oil pipeline that's supposed to pass oil from Niger to Benin and then for exports to China. I think it was the Chinese that funded that pipeline. And given that Benin decided to close its border with Niger, it puts the deal in jeopardy, put the deal in limbo, and Niger just couldn't get the best out of the deal. So it was a source taking point for the Nigerians, so much so that when the coup in December 2025 in Benin happened, it was reported that the Nigerians had foreknowledge of it and tacitly supported the coup plotters. So Wadagni doing this thing in a few days after coming to power sort of takes away even though he was part of the former administration, but since he is now running the government, it gives him some sort of a bit of a credibility within the AES states. And given that Nigeria was very instrumental in putting down the coup in Benin in December, Nigeria has been that much of a strong pillar running and even more presently so, and importantly as a bridge between the Nigeria ECOWAS bloc or the Western Centric ECOWAS bloc and then the pulled away AES state. So that's it from the economic standpoint. I think trying to do better trade and commerce with not just Nigeria, the other side of the borders to the east, but the AES states, which are vital for trade in terms of giving their landlocked nature. I think there's a lot of ways in which transit fees that Benin could have easily got that they have lost in terms of their poor relationship with Niamey, Ouagadougou, and Bamako. Maybe not so much as Ouagadougou, but more importantly, Niamey, where the beef from 2023 continues to live. And so I think, I don't know if it answers the question, but it gives our listeners some sort of a background to why the new leader of Benin is embarking on that many tours in just his first week of being in office.
I mean, it's really interesting because, like you said, it's kind of like a renewed interest. Um, what do you think? Do you think that he's going to succeed? Is this showing us that, he's a president you know, with some vision for the country? How do you rate? I mean, from these first few weeks, how do you rate him? Do you think that he's going to be a good president, or we have to keep watching him to see?
It's too early, but it is important to state that some of the most significant constraints on Benin supported programs, um, Benin's future progresses are increasingly regional. So relations with Niger, will remain affected by the tensions that followed the coup in 2023 and the closed border between Benin and Niger. It's not just going to, even after the 15-day period, I think we should have elapsed right now. It's not going to lead to automatic reopening of the border. This is 18th of June as we're recording. I've not seen any news that showed that the border has been reopening. And this is one of the challenges that Benin has limited capacity to resolve. In the latter, I'm talking about the border now, and it makes cooperation with neighboring governments an important part of any lasting solution. And so you see that progress towards reopening the Benin-Niger border could restore an important trade and transit corridor and then strengthen economic links. So if he manages to pull off opening the border, I think we can begin to talk about what this portends in the long term. Stable relationship with Nigeria is equally significant given its importance as Benin's largest partner and a key source of trade and energy. That is a given. I mean, Tinubu was very instrumental in ensuring that Wadagni became president by not only sending troops to quell the coup, but also to guard the transition. So that is not a problem. But what would remain a problem is in his own ability to work with his rivals, Niger, for instance, to reopen the border. Again, I think a lot of things remain to be seen if he's able to pull that. I don't think he's going to pull that unilaterally on his own, because if you open the border on your side of the country and if Niger refuses to open the border on their side of the country, the question then becomes, what then happens?
Yeah, I mean, we just have our eyes on Benin and see what comes out of this. Let's move over to our next story where we discuss about Nigeria, where we're seeing Nigeria is intensifying its fight against terrorism, and it has secured 150 terrorism-related convictions and the sentencing of 4 individuals in the role that they played in the 2022 Owo church killings. Do you think the government is doing enough in terms of prosecuting and, the convictions in terms of terrorists? Do you think more needs to be done? And how can we ensure that it serves as a deterrent, like using the prosecution, convictions, just to serve as a deterrent for people to stop, these crimes? We see the old church attack happened in 2022, and this is 2026 where we're getting a conviction. Do you think there's a delay? Do you think there's a need for a special court to deal with terrorism cases? Just kind of to ramp it up so people know that when you commit this crime, your punishment is immediate as opposed to delayed. What are your thoughts on this?
I think a little bit of a background. We need to understand the concept or the context behind what is happening at the moment. So in 2022, a couple of guys went into St. Francis Xavier Church in Owo, in Owo. Am I pronouncing that right? In Owo, in Ondo State, and killed about 52 people. This was on June 5th, 2022, and the government at the time attributed the attack to the Islamic State West Africa province, even though the details and such a causal link was quite tenuous. But now it has taken about 4 years, and a lot of times we need to understand that terrorism trials are not really that straightforward. There are a couple of things that factor into the time. But the first thing would be how to find them. I don't think the governments found them as quickly as they should have. I think it's looking for the now convicted terrorists took 6 months to a year to find. So you first of all have to find them and then do all of the investigations, try to know indeed if these were the only people they were acting. Were they acting on their own in concert with each other, or there were other people at bay that needs to also be brought in, and several of that. And given our lack of a centralized database as a country, all of the things that we do in terms of investigation is mostly with, looking at phone records and looking at and relying on crude methods such as, sometimes torture, to bring out a confession. It takes all of this, it takes some time, and then also the judicial process it's not always as straightforward because we have a lot of adjustments in courts. But all of these things together, it sort of gives some bit of a relief for the families of the people who lost people, in that particular attack. To answer your question, if having a special terrorism court, we're going to fix this. At the moment, we do not have permanent standalone terrorism courts. So what the government does is it utilizes specialized sessions and designated courtrooms within existing federal high court framework to exclusively handle and then expedite terrorism cases. As you know, I mean, given that you're a lawyer, terrorism is a federal crime. The Terrorism Prevention Act of 2011, 2013, and then 2022 and 2024 sort of stipulates that terrorism is a federal crime that is punishable by using other things. So the federal high court has done these specialized tribunals or mass tribunals to process large batches of detainees. So these are often held in specially constructed courtrooms at secure military detention facilities such as the Wawa military cantonment in Kinji in Niger State. So you also have designated judges from the federal high courts that are deployed to hear these cases. So if, for instance, mass trials are taking place directly before judges in Abuja in order to clear massive case backlogs. Now, all of these things to say that at the very least, we could give the Nigerian government some credit in the sense that they know, because using these mass trials as a strategy to get a lot of these people who have done terribly behind bars is something that was born from a need. The military has them and relax, but even the military itself do not have the capability to handle such large number of people because let's face it, if you look at the arrest of criminals, especially when it comes to terrorism, the government does not carry out these operations in, should I say, a well-adjusted manner in which they are practical enough to pinpoint who is a terrorist and who they're actually going for. So what they do more often than not is to cast a really, really wide net. And when you cast a wide net like that, for you to fish, you could fish a lot of things. You could fish tilapia. If you're looking for tilapia, you could also fish periwinkle. And if you're not looking for periwinkle, what do you do? And if you're under pressure, public pressure for you to show results that you actually got the tilapia, the public is you insult is due to the fact that what's the Attorney General of the Federation last week simply how many people is going to court some or tendency that even people do things like supplying information to bandits or being supplies, could be food supplies, people caught inadvertently selling something that could be basic home supplies. A bandit could actually be as a bandit informant or enabling bandits or terrorists. And so all of these things, it is very important for us to look at this itself and then ask exactly what does the government mean by the fact that it has what does this thing even say again? It has prosecuted 150 people. I think it would be more helpful for us to know each case or each court where these people are tried, what was the offense, what are the statistics, who did what, in what particular area, in what zone. I think for us to get these things, the government really needs to have some sort of a public dashboard that you could say, let's say we arrested this person, we have tried this person, this is what the judge said, this is how many years the person was sentenced to. I think it's a lot more helpful than just going to parliament and then telling members of the legislation that we have done so and so without giving us details that can be used to hold the government accountable.
I agree with you. There has to be more transparency reporting process, because this helps people to have more information and to see that these things happen. To our final story where an army officer was killed during a rescue mission. How do you think that the government, in also trying to protect lives, protects the lives of our security personnel who take up this, rescue operations sometimes and also put their lives on the line to protect citizens? How can they balance to ensure that in protecting and safeguarding civilians, that they also, protect themselves as well? And if you want to give us a background to that story as well, that would also be great.
Yeah, the I think the lieutenant was killed trying to rescue the I think about 45 school children. They were kidnapped by Boko Haram elements led by Sadiku, a factional leader of Boko Haram, in in and around the KG area or the old Oyo National Park. So these people were abducted about a month ago from their school. Some of the teachers were taken, some of them beheaded. So there's been a national outcry in terms of protests, in terms of social media campaigns to release them. About 2 weeks ago, there was a report that made the news, I think originating from the Oyo State House of Assembly, that the demands of the kidnappers were essentially ransom, the implementation of Sharia law or subsets of Sharia law in Oyo State, as well as the release of imprisoned militant leaders from the old Ansaru, now known as Mahmuda group, which were arrested by the Office of the National Security Advisor in August of 2025. So in the days that preceded that, we have seen the kidnappers come out to say that the whole thing about ransom as well as the implementation of Sharia is actually false, that they never said that all they wanted is release of the terror leaders. And it's a little bit difficult to do because these people we are talking about are not just any terror leaders, but high profile leaders of um, the first ever Al-Qaeda affiliate in Nigeria, which is Ansaru. Ansaru is the first breakaway faction of Boko Haram. Broke away from the group in early 2012 and then relocated from the northeast to the north central and the northwest, and over time pledged allegiance to Al Qaeda. And now it's now known as Mahmuda in some places and have pledged allegiance to the larger Al Qaeda network, and it's now part of the larger Al Qaeda franchise operating in northwest and central Nigeria today, in addition to JNIM, as well as the border Ansari and other terror groups in the region. For the lieutenant that was killed, it is hard for one to carry out this, especially independently of any kind of international help or collaboration without coming off with so much casualties. I don't want to sit here and pontificate, but I do think that for such a tragedy to have occurred, it is likely that the military did not really take into account the high stakes nature of such an operation. So they were likely going to, they likely went into that operation thinking it was going to shoot a way out and then take the hostages, forgetting the fact that a lot of these groups, not even just terrorists alone in terms of Islamist groups, but also bandits are increasingly using things like IEDs and several other tactics, asymmetric tactics that keeps them that preserves their personal lives and to stave off pressure. And we're increasingly seeing the use of IEDs and FPV drones in battlefields in the northeast, especially in terms of FPV drones, as well as IEDs in the north central and in the north west. I am not sure that Governor Sheyi Makinde giving us the news told us exactly how the lieutenant was killed, but I am assuming that in the absence of that information, this is likely what happened, especially if there was no clash that happened. It was likely that the soldiers who went on such a rescue mission may have stepped onto landmines and they have been killed, or they may have been ambushed and they were killed. For such an operation, I think it's important to first of all understand and appreciate the high stakes nature of that operation and to prepare accordingly. And I think one key reason why the military has not really gone into full force in rescuing these people is because it is likely to result in outcomes that may not be too palatable, not only just for the families but also for the public, because rescuing such a large amount of people may result in death, not just of personnel but also from the victims and civilians themselves. And so this is a thing that needs a lot of planning and understanding of the terrain as well as an appreciation for what could possibly go wrong with every other thing taken into account. Is actually taken into account.
That brings us to the end of this episode. Thank you very much, Confidence, for joining us and sharing your insights with us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's always a pleasure. To all our listeners, this podcast is by SBM Intelligence. You can access our podcast by searching for SBM Intelligence anywhere you find podcasts. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe, like, share, and let us know your thoughts in the comment section. It's always great reading back your feedbacks from each episode. For deeper insights into our work, visit our website at sbmintel.com. Remember that you can connect with us on all our social media platforms. You can find us on X, Facebook, Blue Sky, and LinkedIn at SBM Intelligence. Thank you for tuning into the week ahead. Join us next Friday, where we discuss more updates that are shaping the African continent.